Okay, this is a video for the Moondrop SSP. It's a single dynamic driver. It's about $40. I'm going to use some music. This is dedicated to a reviewer who sent me a mail about a week ago. Very long when I read it. It was pretty much an essay. And to all the people out there that think frequency graphs are getting a little bit too out of control as far as people are making decisions based on them with minimal other feedback, including music. By looking at something, if it's shaped in a certain way, it must be good. That's not true. And if it's shaped in another way, it must not be good. That's also not true. And the reviewer that I'm speaking of wrecked a lot of stuff that somebody would drop a graph and then instantly people would run away, and it was a good set. And I can feel his pain, because as a person that does graphs, not the best graphs, but I do them, I would look at a set like the SSP and think, 13 dB peanut gain, that's not going to work out for me. And yet, when I listen to When the Levee Breaks, the kick drum is in fact authoritative. When I listen to A Whole Lot of Love, the bass guitar is in fact authoritative. This is an amplitude scale. This is showing which frequencies are amplified, how much they're amplified relative to the rest of the scale, which usually exists between 20 hertz and 20 kilohertz. That's all it does. It doesn't indicate the quality of the playback. It doesn't take into account the quality of the driver, the type of driver, the combinations of drivers, the material that is used to enclose the drivers, the fill, the no fill. All of the variables, decisions are being made on this. Not only that, but people are building a community around people that just pretty much look at a graph and make extrapolate info and then fill in the blanks when they finally listen to music, because they've really already come to their conclusion when they look at graphs. So if to the person that sent me the mail, this is dedicated to you, and to all the people out there that have had a set that they loved only to see people run away from it without hearing it because somebody dropped a graph. This EJ07 right here that is customized, I've loved it. I've never not loved it. And it was said to be rolled off in the treble and missing critical info. And I'm a person that does reviews based on music. Always have. There's more people coming my way, by the way. And because when I listen to music, somebody used to mock that I use Tupac. If I'm listening for a low frequency impact, why would I not listen to something that I'm very familiar with, especially a high quality version of it? That's ignorance, one form of it anyway. This is Big Boy. This is Kill Jill. It's got the Vocaloid Hatsune, I think is her name, something. I'm not into that music. My students are, the little girls. It's not overly obnoxious. It's actually not really at all. It sounds quite good, and the triple bass hit sounds real good. Let me go ahead and listen to that while I got you on here. See if you can hear this. It can be grating. Okay, bear with me for a minute here. I'm waiting for this hit to drop. It's actually a triple hit. Okay, here it comes. 24, 25, 26, 27. And then the bass guitar comes in at about 45 seconds. It sounds excellent. It sounds really good. That massive elevation at 3.5 is not showing itself in any negative way. It's not impacting. That's a Vocaloid singer. I don't know a lot of stuff that's more intense in that harmonic range than a female voice, especially computer generated. And yet, it's not really getting in the way, despite the fact that the graph would indicate that probably wouldn't be a great track to play on something tuned like that. The Great Gig in the Sky by Pink Floyd. Let me check out Led Zeppelin real quick. I'm not going to listen to it because I already did. The kick drum, the SSR was R stood for reference. Now that means it's supposed to be. The implication is reference set, like you're going to get back what's supposed to be there, and without too much bass, because that would be a bassy set, or too much treble, because that would be a treble headset or whatever you call that. Reference set would imply balanced, something that is delivering the product without any extra packaging. Like, that's what it does. Yet the reference didn't do that, because the reference didn't do this the way it is mastered, which means that it's not a reference set. It was one of the worst sets that I listened to in 2020, literally. And I listened to a lot of crap. That was really bad. This actually plays the kick drum. It sounds to me like the driver is not large, because it doesn't sound bombastic, and it's supposed to kind of be that way, but it does sound authoritative, and it does sound like it's front and center, and that's what it's supposed to be. And then the harmonica comes in, and it's not overwhelming like the Vocaloid singer. It's not that bad. It's clear, it's crisp, but the bass is where it's supposed to be, so it doesn't sound, there's no problem. I go to A Whole Lot of Love on the second album, and I listen to the beginning, and John Paul Jones's intro line is perfect. It's substantial, and then he falls back behind Robert Plant as soon as he comes into the song. It sounds exactly the way it's supposed to be. We're not having any problems. I listen to other stuff, but I'm going to try to keep this simple. This is Dark Side of the Moon. The Great Gig in the Sky, track number 5. There's a female singer, and she gets way up there, and she can really be an indicator of, like, this is not, I can't listen to the whole album. You went through all of this, you got to Time and the bells and the ringing, and we're thinking, Jesus Christ, and then got to number 5, and you've had enough, because the next thing is going to be Money, and they got a cash register where they're hitting the register, and it's opening and the change, and it's, if there's something that's got a lot of treble emphasis, this is an album that might not be ideal for you. This is more of a relaxing kind of thing. This is not a problem on the SSPs. This is actually a really good set, and its graph doesn't indicate it would be a great set. Might be average to niche, like this group of people would probably find it appealing because the graph indicates that. Well, the graph is wrong, because I'm listening to hip-hop, West Coast 90s, and it sounds fine. I'm listening to Paul Simon, I listen to 50 Ways, I listen to all the stuff I usually listen to, but to keep it simple, these 5 tracks will do. This sounds fine. It sounds actually really good. The last one will be Rat. You're in love. You're in love. Sounds fine. Guitar is intense. It's supposed to be. Some things are supposed to be in your face. You know what I mean? Up in the treble range. And this guitar is supposed to be, and it is. But so is the kick drum when it's supposed to be, and so is the keyboard, and so is the bass guitar, and everything is where it's supposed to be and quite clear. The SSP is a good set. It's a very good set. I recommend it. And it's also a good example of a graph indicating things that don't really exist, and also proof in that some reviewers or people that give opinions build their opinions around the graph instead of around the music. If I look at this, I'm thinking that a song like The Great Gig in the Sky won't do well in this, because female vocals, where the fundamental and the harmonic extension range exists, and my experience in the past with some sets, that wouldn't be okay. And yet I listen to it, because I really should before I make an opinion, and it sounds fine. It sounds good. It sounds clear. It doesn't even sound like it would be fatiguing after a certain period of time, because that's the give and take. Like, you're getting good clarity, and that sounds good, but it's going to be fatiguing after a little while. I'm not actually getting that. I'm just getting crystal clear replay. It's a very, very impressive set. If you really like the authoritative kick drum, now look at that bass, it's not that different. It sounds like a slightly smaller driver. That would be my only nick on it, but I'm kind of almost looking for something. The cable seems fine. I think they had a problem with that before. They improved that. Low range sounds good. It's not bleeding into the mids, whatever the graph says. Beryllium sets benefit is that they're faster. They are stiffening the diaphragm. There's reasons to do that, and there's results that come from doing that, and that is that what might graph as elevated bass won't necessarily, if this is done correctly, play out that way. It is the whole point of using beryllium, and it works on this set. At no point did I feel like the mids were getting a little squished up, or the bass. Let me talk about the treble for a second, because I talked about this a long time ago when I talked about frequency graphs, and I said that's only a few ways to do the low end and the mids. Really, there's only a few. But the treble is a rainbow. That is where people's personal taste and library really comes into play. When you've got elevated bass and it's done with a driver that's not of great quality, whatever you did after that doesn't really matter, because the elevated bass is going to veil or create a haze over the rest of the replay, and it doesn't really, it's pointless. They messed up the bass, and even if the mids and the treble are great, you're not going to get ideal playback because the bass was overdone. And if you underdo the bass, you're going to put all of your audio mental emphasis on the upper range, which is what the SSR was, and that is going to be so odd. It is going to make the music sound unappealing, unfamiliar, and the bass isn't there, and it's going to sound less so because your focus is being completely pulled up into the treble, because there's nothing else to focus on, really, unless you're wincing your ears and trying to hear it. So something having treble like this really isn't a problem, and something having trouble like really anything. So if you've had a set over the past year and you thought it's great, the NM2, I think it's NF Audio NM2 Plus, has a really elevated treble, and I'm going to revisit that set, because this set kind of, I got caught in the, graphs are, they'll tell you trust graphs. People lie, graphs don't. Well, graphs don't have to lie, but they don't have all the info, and there's a lot of people cropping up in the hobby that are using graphs as the almighty indicator, and they're now kind of getting into timestamps and songs and little stuff because they've got to protect their credibility, but they're not really into music. That's kind of obvious by reading just a few paragraphs or watching just a few minutes. Music is not really what they're here for. They're here for not having a real job and trying to be a YouTuber or something. I don't really know. But a set that I was sure in my mind, because of the people who liked it and me not having prior agreements with them on musical taste, I would suppose. And looking at the graph, I assumed that I was not going to like this set. And yet, I'm recommending it to you. It's actually really good. For its price, it's probably going to fit. The only thing I would put on it would be foams, and then you should be good to go. How does it compare to the Belon 01? I'll actually compare it. I think it sounds a little crisper and cleaner, but I think the musicality, which is coming from the bass, is a little bit better on the Belon 01 from my library, because something like the kick drum on When the Levee Breaks does sound more like being there at the show or in the studio where it's being done, whereas this is a little more clinical, but not to the point of not being enjoyable. It is in a slightly different way. But the treble difference between the two sets is not what the issue is. It's the different presentation of the low end. Though they graph not that different, they present it differently. One, this is maybe tighter, a little bit faster, to the good and bad. Like, that's got pluses and minuses to it. But this is the SSP. It's a very good set. Very surprised, and I'm going to reevaluate how I treat graphs and make sure that I don't put too much emphasis on them beyond sharing them. And if someone says, does that point of that graph make this, and then they ask a question about guitars or vocals, and if it's in my library, I'll go ahead and check it out. But I'm not going to make decisions or recs or avoid stuff because of graphs, because I've done that in the past year, and I think that was not really the best way. And that essay that was written by another YouTuber, thank you, because that's always been in my head, the people that you mentioned and the things that you said, and I kind of was a part of that slowly and subconsciously, didn't even really realize it. because there's so much stuff going on. If somebody likes a set and then another reviewer doesn't like that person, then they have motivation to not like that set, kind of to be the yin to the yang. And it happens. I've seen it happen to other people. I've seen it happen to myself, because you can't take the human factor, ego, pride out of this hobby. It happens here. It happens with computer reviewers. It happens in all of the hobbies, and it happens on different platforms like Reddit and YouTube and forums. People don't like the person, therefore the message is whatever, because they're not going to like it because the person that's giving the message, and so they'll develop their own counter message, because that's the way this hobby works. And it's not good or bad. It is bad, but it's the way it is, and it's not going to change. I'll try to change my weight of a graph. It's got its spot, but it doesn't take the place of the music. And again, if you've been watching in the past year and seen me migrate more towards leaning on graphs, I'll continue to use them, but I won't let them influence me to not give something a shot, even if it sounds a little, get past that stage where the graph is still in my mind while I'm listening to music, and just get up past that and focus on the music only. This set did that to me. I was sure that I wasn't going to like it, was maybe going to not do the video, because what's the point of taking away from other people's happiness? What's good is what you like, and if I don't like it, is my input necessary? Are people getting ripped off? If it's like that level, sure, I gotta jump in. But if it's just I'm not a fan and I got other sets to review, what's the point? Just grab another set. And if you don't skip a bunch because you don't like them, but you don't have to get every set and everything. There's other people that'll give their opinions. So this is the SSP. It's by Moondrop, and it is quite good. And it doesn't graph to this reviewer's taste, but it sounds quite good with this reviewer's library. So there's some conflict there. And when in doubt, go with the music. And I'm out.